Does it need,
There. I think
does
you
it,
know.
are we good? Because it feels like it's right off of my eye. Feels kind of weird. That's okay.
Can you hear it?
Yeah,
Can I hear it? Okay.
yeah.
Just go ahead. I'll just do it this way. Hi. I'm Liz Hoffman-Bauer, and I'm happy that we have a very different, well, I like them all the songs, but this is a very different one today. Nan Erbaugh is kind of new. She's one of our newest members for the chapel and worship committee, and we're enjoying her. It's I get the good one. Okay. Anyway, she's our newest member for our worship and chapel committee. And so when I asked her if she would do an Evensong, she told me, "How many times have you been to Guam?" Or what?
I've been to Sudan 5 times.
Sudan. She's been to Sudan several times, and so I just assumed she takes us to Sudan. But then she said, I was a pastor in Ohio, and one of the programs that they started there was having us ride with the police. I think I'll tell you about some of those things. That sounds great.
I rode with the police for 8.5 hours, and I'm Nan Erbaugh.
Now, the one thing that she has her life all together, I think, because she has a dream of mine. She lives in the same city as her grandchildren. When she moved here, she had 2 sons, and now she has grandchildren here. And I think that's just wonderful. So let's hear what she has to say about the program.
Right, thanks. I don't need that one. Well, good afternoon. Thanks so much for coming. I just made some notes. This was my uniform. This is it. Every time I rode with the police, this says police and clergy together right on it. And I had an official badge so that on the scene, they knew that I was with the police. And you don't normally see me with my hair in a ponytail, but we wanted it, you wanted your hair back because you never knew what you were going to get involved in. Didn't want your hair in the way, that sort of thing. So, yeah, anyway. Well, back in 2012, the chief of police in Dayton, Richard Beale, he just felt there was a need for a calming presence and a listening ear at some police scenes. Officers, were busy putting the caution tape up, gathering evidence, and they could not stop and put their arm around someone whose child had just committed suicide and say, "I'm so sorry." They couldn't do that. So he created Police and Clergy Together, PACT, and he modeled it after a program in Dallas, Texas. And there are 3 foundations of PACT. First, as a pastor, as part of the program, you're committing to pray for the police department, to pray for the safety of the officers, to pray that their wisdom and observation skills and split-second decision-making is good. Second, you're committing to building relationships with police officers primarily through regular ride-alongs. We'd usually ride a half of a shift. I usually rode 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. And then third was you needed to be able to be available for call-outs to minister to citizens when there were just critical, horrible things going on. They would just call, and there were 2 different officers who might be the ones who would call, and they would say, "Now, if you see my phone, if you see my name come up on your cell phone, if you don't have time, to go to a call out, don't answer the phone because I'm just going through to get somebody there quickly." So that's what we did. We had to go through 10 weeks of training before we could ride, 3 hours each week. And that was so they could help us learn what expectations there were, what the boundaries were, what we could and couldn't do. And just issues that might crop up. I mean, let's be honest, you never know what you're going to get into. And if suddenly you're at the scene of a terrible accident or a gun shooting, there can be a lot of blood. There could be, you know, um, just terrible scenes. Let's just put it that way. And if that's just something you can't do, you need to think about that before you get into the program. Um, Also, we just didn't know how the officers would accept the program because this was not something that was being done in Ohio anywhere. Would they think we were going to quiz them about their faith, while we're driving along in the car? Are you saved? What church do you go to? They were like, no, we would never do that, So that, there were just concerns because I think the officers, this was new to them. And I think there were some who were concerned that we were doing this so we could tattle on them. They did this or they did that. So trust was a huge issue, and it took a while to build some trust. And the sidebar of it was that we were able to build a bridge between the public and the police. My church, Lower Miami, was half black, half white. So anytime there was an officer-involved shooting, you can be sure there were lots of discussions about it. At Lower Miami, all the folks of color at the church said, hey, we've had the talk. We know that if we're driving at night and the police come up behind us, you don't pull over until you're in a public place. Or if you get stopped by the police, put your hands on the dashboard, don't reach for anything. So they were wary of the police. One interracial couple, she was white, he was black. And he said, oh yeah, we got stopped multiple times when we were dating because I wasn't speeding. Officer, what was I doing? What was wrong? Nothing, but said, ma'am, are you in this car of your own will? Because they just didn't like the idea of the interracial couple. So, Lower Miami was like, wow. But it did give us opportunities because whenever there was something that was kind of, an officer-involved shooting, and the police department, just like on TV, here out of Fort Wayne, you get a press conference, that sort of thing. Whatever 911 calls you're going to hear or whatever video you're going to hear, the chief would always have all of us come in first, an hour before the media, show the whole thing to us, and then say, okay, what questions do you have? What do I need to clarify? So that was helpful because then it helped me to be able to see some things that maybe the general public didn't make the 6 o'clock news, right? So that helped with talking with people. It didn't take long to get to know the officers. My goodness, their job is difficult. How they just constantly have to switch from one thing to the other. You never know what you're walking into when you arrive at a scene. How often they're called to be counselors in custody issues. Literally pulling the children both ways, or trying to resolve relationship conflicts, or to deal with folks who are dealing with severe mental illness or homeless. I used to tell them, I said, gosh, you got a new thing for your resume. You can put down marriage counselor, on your resume. And they would just shake their heads. They said, yeah, it's such a problem. And then, in the midst of all this crazy stuff going on, come 8:30, they'd watch the clock and they'd stop and they would call their children and do FaceTime with their children and say, how was your day? Are you listening to mom? Okay, well, let's say our prayers together. I mean, it was just so sweet, And so we would I'd ask them about their children and stuff. And yeah, that was just really amazing how the constant switching back and forth. I felt it was really a tough thing. And as you drive along, it was really interesting to watch them interact with with children. We would always wave to little kids, and they wave and everything. Usually the children wave first. Whenever you stop, you're out of the vehicle, on the sidewalk, whatever, they would always carry stickers with them to give to the children, do high fives and whatnot. And trying to just do something so the children don't grow up fearing the police. That, the goal. Because whenever there's a police car around, right, everybody comes out. Everybody's got to come out and watch and everything. And there were times, I have to tell you, there were times when just random people would be stopped on the street, and most often it was young black men. And they would give up their Social Security number in a heartbeat. We're all told, you don't just give your Social Security number to just anybody. They just give it up immediately. And of course, the officer would come back, run the SOCH, make sure that they didn't have an outstanding warrant or a reason, to take them in. And then he'd say, "Thank you, sir. Thanks for stopping. Have a good evening. Talk to you later." We get back in the car and we stop. I say, "Okay, now tell me what you saw that I didn't see as to why you stopped him. What was the deal?" He said, "Oh, well," he said, "yesterday at roll call, they were telling, he fit the description of a guy that had stolen a car." And I thought, there were times when I thought, yeah, right. Because I couldn't prove that one way or the other. I wasn't at roll call yesterday. I was only at roll call today. And there were times when I just thought there was no reason to stop, that person. And we did have periodic meetings with chief of police. And we found within our group, I said that there are times when somebody gets stopped. One pastor was riding in the evening, and they stopped someone, and he said, "This is the fourth time I've been stopped today. Come on, that's just crazy." So it's there. It's there. Not every officer, but it's there. And I have to say, some things are just downright funny. When you go to some place because you've gotten a tip and you're zooming to get there, because it said somebody who was escaping from this or that, or they're the ones that we're looking for, and they just got to the so-and-so's house. So we go there and we go in, we talk and say, "Did they come?" "No, they didn't come. I haven't seen them," stuff. "Well, would you mind if we look around?" "No, go ahead." They're always hiding in the closet. What? Come on. Seriously, So, I say, "Come on, sir, we need to take you. You have an outstanding warrant. You did this, did that." And so we go in. And so when we would be waiting in the Sally Port, you go in, there's a little tiny area, not very big at all, where you're waiting you have to stay and wait with that person for them to be taken in and, what's the word I want? Like entered in and put in the jail. Okay. And it's a locked door and you just have to stand. It's always really cold in there. And then there's just a slit because your person's handcuffed. There's a slit there in the door so that when they come, look through the window and bring your person in. Then when they're finished with their input, then they slide the handcuffs back out for the officer because they need to stay with him. But yeah, we'd say, "What? Why were you hiding in the closet? Did you think we weren't going to look there?" And it was a young woman, the one that's just, "I know, that was just stupid. That was just stupid." But she said, I just did it. It was just kind of comical. So anyway, and Thad, oh my gosh, that officer. I was with him a lot. We got a call. Okay. This woman said, "I need you to come. My son's baby mama is driving up and down the street in front of my house, and she is threatening me." And we go, "Okay." So we go there, we go up, and she comes out, and he said, "Okay, did she, yeah, she's been doing this all the time." "Well, did she get out of the car and come up?" "Yeah, she did. She came up and stood on the porch." He said, did she have a weapon? What was she doing?" "Nothing." She says, "I got my bat. I went and got my bat." And he said, "Okay, did you come out onto your porch with your bat?" She said, "Yes, I did. She was threatening me." Well, the woman wasn't doing anything. So it just keeps going. He said, ma'am, there's nothing I can do. You can call it, actually she could probably press charges against you because you came out with a bat. And so, boy, she didn't like that. And boy, that's in the language. I mean, every swear word you can ever think of just came rip, rip, rip out of her mouth. She was so mad. And she said, I just don't know why anybody calls the police. They don't do anything. They're not helping. And he said, ma'am, I'm sorry. I can't do anything for you, but is there anything else I can do for you today? And he said, if she comes back, just call, okay? You call us. And so we got in the car, or as we left, he said, now have a blessed day to her. It was just, I thought, how in the world, to keep your composure. But that happened a lot. Or the person, he said that to the woman who was swearing at him and all this stuff. He said, yeah. He said, have a blessed day, ma'am. Yeah. And he said, yeah, but there's frustration, right? She wasn't really mad at him. She's mad at her whole situation and stuff. It's just, I'm sure that's a piece of it. There was one guy, Harry, who was in the Vietnam War, mental illness, and he would always position his wheelchair by the VA in Dayton, a main intersection. And then he always had open wounds on the front of his left leg. And we would have to say, Harry, you can't just be here begging, okay? You need to get saved. So it was, and he would get violent. And the thing was, it was so sad because he would get an apartment. He had a VA pension. I mean, he had, the means, had his lawyer's number on his phone and everything. But I saw him many times because he would be in an apartment and they were going to throw him out because of how he acted. So then there was another apartment. The jail would not keep him. The VA would not keep him. No place would keep him. The homeless shelter would not keep him. And I just kept thinking, that's awful. So he's just out on the street. The last time I saw him, it was at night, it was dark, it was raining, and we were getting calls on it. It was just a little side street, maybe a block long in Dayton. They said, there's a guy in a wheelchair trying to wheel up this little hill, and it's dark and it's raining and he's going to get hit, So we went to this, and it was Harry. He had wheeled down to this convenience store to get some alcohol, had it in his bag, and he was protecting that and trying to hold on to that and it plus wheel. I said, Harry, what are you doing, man? You're going to get hit or something. Well, I'm trying to get back up to my house. I'm renting this house, and I let the prostitutes come in and stay. They promised they'd pay some rent, but they're just trashing the place. And they said, well, Harry, you can't, we need to take you. You need to get out of the weather. Okay. He's on the phone to his lawyer. It's 10 o'clock at night. Do you think the lawyer's going to answer? Of course not. So while my officer walked back down a ways where we were parked to bring the vehicle up to try to get him in the vehicle, he said, Harry, you got to stay overnight in the homeless shelter. You got to be safe. So I'm standing there with Harry, and he's like, so now who are you? I said, yeah, we've met before. And he said, but you're in a different uniform. And I said, well, I'm Pastor Nan. I'm with police and clergy together. Oh, I've got a question for you. Totally changed. He said, what does it mean when they say blessed are the peacemakers? Isn't that amazing? Where did that come from? Yeah. Where did that come from? I don't know. So we had a little chat until the officer thankfully we were in an SUV, so it was easier to kind of maneuver. It took 3 or 4 of us, but we got him. But where's the future for him? But you know what? I don't know this area well enough. Is there like an inpatient mental illness hospital in Fort Wayne? Is there? Yeah. So Dayton had one and they closed it. So where do the mentally ill end up? On the street.
Mm-hmm.
Then one spring day, I call him Knife Guy on a bike because I cannot for the life of me remember his name. Got a call that there was a little disturbance. And here is this homeless gentleman on a bicycle, and he knew the guy in this house and had been staying there temporarily. And then they got into it a little bit. Okay, so he's in the back. He's in the backyard where we were in the alley behind the house. And my officer called him by name. And he knew my officer because he's on the street, so they see him all the time. And he said, "Okay, so I'll tell you what, we can calm this down, but I want to go talk to the guy in the house and see if, because he could press charges. We'll want to see what's going on. I want you to sit in the back, okay, of the cruiser. But you got to give me your weapons." I mean, I couldn't see that he had anything. He had a long coat on with lots of pockets, like a cargo thing. You guys, if he pulled out one knife, he pulled out 6 or 7. One and the two. One of them was like the curved, long, pulled all these things out, then handed them right over. So my officer put him in the back, in the trunk. So he got in the back of the car. And so we had a nice chat for about 20 minutes. He said, my mom worked for the police. She was a receptionist. And they treated her so well. They were always so respectful of her. I said, well, that's good. I'm glad she had that experience. And he said, my mom always told me, always tell the truth to the police. That's what they want from you. They want the truth. And he said, so that's what I do. And I get along fine with all of these policemen, with all these officers. We had just a nice chat. So when my officer came back out, he said, okay, he said, the guy's not going to press any charges, but we are going to trespass you from this whole block, meaning your trespass, do not be on this block, period, at all. So he said, okay, but you can make it, you can get to the 7-Eleven or whatever. This was a little residential street, you'll be okay. So he gets out, proceeds to give him all of the weapons back, and he puts them in their pocket, and he went down the street on his bike, homeless. And I thought, surely we can do better than this, but what do you do? Then I'll just spend a couple minutes on the call outs were the hardest, no warning, just a call. Nan, we've got a dead baby, can you go? Sunday afternoon, just getting home from church, almost to the back door. And so we just got back in the car and went. Thankfully, by the time we got there, the dog had been removed. Animal resource had come, and the baby had been taken to the hospital. Yeah, it was awful. It was just awful. The young mom they were from Indy, and she and her husband had come over to visit his family. And it was the step grandma who was watching the baby. And while they did something else, I think the dad and they were doing something else, and the young mom was visiting. So the only person I saw was the young mom. And by golly, I think the step grandma just literally turned, I bet, because the baby was on the bed and the dog was in the room with them, which shouldn't have been. But I bet she turned to get a diaper, but nonetheless, comes back and the dog right there, just one bite, that baby was gone. She grabbed a blanket and went running to her next door neighbor who works at a nursing home, who called the police, and that mom sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, and she never spoke a word. Never spoke a word. And she was sitting like, how you might have like a little low retaining wall before your yard. She was sitting down low, and I just kept, holding her and talking to her. And people started to come, and they were getting rude. They were they were upset. I understand that. But they were like, they need to take that grandma, just really getting nasty. She had one friend that had come, was sitting next to her. I said, can you try to get those people to move, tell them, leave her alone. There's enough to deal with here. Eventually, they asked me, they said, come over, the step-grandma is over here in the neighbor's house still. So I was able to talk to the neighbor and to the step-grandma, who was, you can imagine, she was just could not believe what had happened. So when they wanted to take her in just to talk to her, and again, and now there were people down at this end of the block watching and waiting. So they said, will you help us walk her to the car? We want to be sure she's safe so that nobody would try to rush us or anything. And I kind of kept watching for that one. 3 months later, I saw in the paper, she was charged with negligent homicide. Yeah. That just had to be, it was horrible. Another one in June, I think it was 2017, 2018. I was riding with Kyle and riding along. All of a sudden, we got a call. Said, does anybody have a packed rider? We've got a possible drowning of a 4-year-old at Eastwood Lake. And he says, we're coming. So we get out of the car, we're running, and it was right where the water, not at the lake, but an offshoot of the lake where they had put big rocks across and stuff to make it kind of like a little rapids. I mean, it was not the place for children to have been because it was too roiling. The water was too. It was a Muslim family. The mom was pregnant, so they pointed out. So we were running to get to her because people were gathering. Thankfully, there was an EMT squad on the site, just a little ways away, doing practices. So they were all in the water. The dad had jumped in the water. There was a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, so I just kept holding her, and she was really big. I thought, oh, please, don't let her go into labor. And finally, they found the body and kept running. She went, I have to see him. And I said, no, let's let them work on him. I mean, we were sure he was dead, but, she couldn't see him. So I rode in the back of the cruiser with her, and there I am. I didn't know any Islamic prayers. Okay, I just kept using Allah language. I said, Allah is with you. Allah is with you. And she had her cell phone, so she started calling people as we were driving so people started coming. And once then the doctor pronounced him dead, then you could hear the cries. And the dad, they had said, Nan, would you go in with the dad to identify the body? They didn't want the mom to go in. Just might be too much for her. So I went in, and Dad was all wet still, from being in the water. He went in, and he just, this little boy, this little Yusef, just looked like he was sleeping, not a mark on him. And he said, oh, he stroked his hair. He said, I just trimmed his hair this morning. Checked his little feet and his hands. I said, you have a beautiful boy. You have a beautiful boy. Yeah, And it was just, that's hard. That was hard. I felt so, just so horrible for them. My goodness gracious. And 1 week later, and the thing is, the EMTs, the other officers, it just really gets to them when there's a child involved. It does. You can see it on their faces. They'll say, I have a 4-year-old or something. Yeah, it's really hard. One of the officers there was Willie, really tall guy, really, really friendly. And the following week, when I rode again, I can't remember the guy's name, but I know it was a 528 Huffman, a known drug house. Here we get called to a drug scene, an overdose. That day they had been there already. 2 guys had overdosed, and they took them to the hospital. This time they were trying like the Dickens with Narcan and other things. It was hot, and I ended up in the corner of the living room holding the IV bag for them because there was like so much to do while they were trying to do compressions and whatever. And then Willie was there, and he said, Nan, I had to climb up over the couch and back down to get. He said, come out. He says, the mom's out here. And so I went and talked with her, and then she was just very unusual. And then she got really angry, which I think is pretty common. You're in turmoil, you're in all kinds of distress. And she she got mad and she started yelling at her neighbor that you did this, you brought those drugs, I know you did. And the lady, like, no, I didn't, and she started picking up grass, pulling grass and throwing it. She was throwing it in my face and everything. It was just really odd. Turns out another lady came walking up the street and she said, I virtually raised her kids. She said, she's the one that got her son on the drugs. He had only been out of prison 5 days, he was gone. So anyway, there was one more where my officer and I were the second ones on the scene, and it was a drug deal gone bad, and thankfully, tattoos are wonderful for helping identify people. Yeah, and so the neighbor saw the two people run out of the house after they heard the shot. It was an apartment complex, and by golly, between people's surveillance cameras on their houses and stuff, they were able to track everything and caught the people the next day close to Cincinnati. But one officer said, Nan, come on in and just pray over him, would you? He was on the floor, and Mr. Armstrong was on the floor face down. They had a gun, and we saw it, and had a ball cap turned upside down with drugs in it we saw it, aha, that's what happened. And so I would go into the bedroom, and he had gotten his gun and was trying to get it loaded when they shot him right there. So I just, prayed for him, and it's amazing how I thought, can I do that? But I've done it so many times now. So many times I said, you know what? You're in the arms of Jesus now. No more threats, no more concern. You're safe. You are safe now. You just feel like it's such a wasted young life, because all these situations, it's usually young men. And then COVID hit, and we had to stop doing call-outs completely, or doing ride-alongs even. But I did do 3 call-outs in the fall of October 2020. A 26-year-old guy who had struggled with depression wrote emails on a Tuesday and told the computer to send them to all these family members at 1 p.m. on Wednesday, because he was planning to kill himself at 11 a.m. And that's what he did. And they were really struggling, trying to come to grips with that. And it was his mom's only child. We're still in touch sometimes, because she just hasn't been able to come to grips with that. But I went to see him. They said, Nan, will you come? There's family from North Carolina. There's family from California. I said, yeah, I'll go. We had a 2-hour talk. And then this was after my husband had just died. And they said, how can you do this? I said, because we're all in this together, right? We're all in this together. We're all have things that are bothering us. Then within 1 week's time, and within 4 days' time, early in February, right after I got my first shot, my first COVID shot, I got 2 call-outs. One was a young wife who shot herself in the head and killed herself. Very unusual for women to kill themselves with a gun. 4 days later, a SIDS death for a baby. So they're riding again now. So, it was a good program. It was a very good program. It was well done. We would meet, and the relationships were good. I remember when my husband went into the VA and I told him, what was going on. The lead officer who ran the program immediately called and said, well, Ken, emailed me and said, do you need help? What can we do for you? We just became a real family. So do you have any questions for me? Yes, Roger.
If the police department here in North Manchester would know about this kind of a story you have, would you be interested in helping them out?
Sure.
Have you done anything yet to let them even know that there is this?
No. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good program, because like I said, when the chief of police in Dayton, he's retired, just before I moved up here. He would teach yoga. And people don't usually think of a police chief as being a yoga teacher. He just was a really, really great guy. So, yeah. And I didn't wear, oh, Laura, go ahead.
How did you process, and how did the police officers process all of the hard stuff?
Yeah, yeah. They could go to therapists and that sort of thing, but a lot of times they didn't. But when I had when Yusuf drowned, and then the very next week we had the overdose, and Willie was at both, and as we were waiting for the coroner and things were calming down, the second one, he got me, put his arm around me. He said, "Nan," I said, "Willie, we got to stop meeting like this." And he said, "I know." He said, "You know what, Nan? I still see that little boy's face. I have cried over him every single night." And I said, I know. That stuff stays with you. And you can't just turn that off. But then they're so busy. I think that they don't take the time to process as much as they should. And they would admit that. Hi. Did you have a question? Yes.
I'm having trouble hearing you. We have a new speaker system.
Yeah.
And I wondered if other people are having trouble understanding. Anybody? Nobody? Maybe. No.
So is it placement, Laura, do you think?
I don't know. It's not as high as it'll go.
Yeah.
The problem is reverberating.
I'll be darned. Huh. That's interesting.
Have you tried different places? I understand about half of what you said.
Oh, that's a shame. It could be the position. Yeah. Yeah, in the front, I think it's okay.
If you listen on YouTube, get on your computer, you can hear it again, and it'll be really good.
Really? That's
Yeah.
the ones I've
On YouTube, any sound is much better
than in the room. 'Cause the ones I've watched have been fine. Yeah. Okay.
They say that mic's the best, but it isn't.
My goodness. Somebody had asked me earlier, they said, did you wear a bulletproof vest? And I said, no, I didn't for years. But then right around December one year, we were starting to have a lot of drive-by shootings in Dayton, and they weren't sure about that. And my congregation said, Nan, are you wearing a bulletproof vest when you ride? And I went, no, I haven't been. They said, you need to. So I started wearing one then, but whatever. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming. I appreciate your time.
I'm glad that we have her. I wanted to tell you that next week we're going to honor mothers. And Amanda Napier, the nurse, is going to tell a story about her mother. She just lost hers not too long ago.
Oh.
And then I'm going to answer with some things about my mother. And we're hoping that we can pick at least 4 of you from the audience to say something about your mother. We're asking you to write it out. We didn't know how to go about it. And we're asking you to write it out, and we thought we'd pull them out. Well, that's what we're going to do. They're in the boxes,
I saw it, yeah.
And so just write something out. If you want to read it, you may. If you want Amanda to read it, she'll read it for you. I'm kind of excited to see how it'll turn out. Then we're going to have something about Father's Day later on. And then comes Sam. How many of you have had Sam in the work for you?
Oh, yeah. They're going to sing.
Sam sings. And
Yeah.
he sings Southern gospel music, and he's bringing his daughter, and the 2 of them are going to sing. And that's 2 weeks.
2 weeks from today. Yeah. That'd be
Put
good.
it on your calendar.
Yeah,
And
thanks.
thank you again.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Let me get my